right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Missoula's City Club Missoula's July Forum. This is the Montana Supreme Court candidates. There are 4 of them. We do have 2 that are missing. They were not able to make this event, but we do have 2 that are here that they'll spar it out up here. Actually, they're running for 2 different seats, so they won't spar it out.
We can get in this bar if we want.
I'm Dave Peppinger. I have the privilege of serving as chair for the City Club Missoula's Board of Directors. Thank you all for being here today. City Club's mission is to bring people together to inform and inspire them on issues vital to the community through public forums that encourage the discussion of new ideas and the free exchange of thought. We have a deep commitment to civility and civil discourse, even when discussing challenging issues. Before getting into the forum, let's get into some of the sincere thank yous. First, let me thank Missoula Community Access Television, which records all of our forums as part of their media assistance grants to nonprofit organizations. MCAT serves our community on cable channels 189 and 190. MCAT occasionally live streams our forums on its local live platform as well. You can also find videos of past City Club Missoula forums by clicking on the video button on our website, cityclubmissoula.com. A special thank you to a special thank you to our sponsors, those at the executive level. They are Blackfoot Communications and First Security Bank. Our executive level sponsors are key partners in helping to expand audience access and public awareness of upcoming forums. We are grateful to all of our sponsors, and we invite you to join. And of course, thanks to our board of directors and our administrator, Yenny Rohrbach. She's at the back. So our speakers for today's panel are Katherine Bidegaray and Jerry Lynch. Corey Swanson and Dan Wilson were unable to attend due to prior obligations. So I will go into Corey's and Dan's bios real quick and then get into our speakers. So Corey Swanson studied farm and ranch management at Montana State University in Bozeman. We won't hold that against him. Before transferring to Carroll College in Helena, graduating with distinction in 2000. Swanson graduated from the University of Montana School of Law with honors in 2004. In January 2013, Swanson was hired as Deputy Attorney General in the Montana Department of Justice for Attorney General Tim Fox. In that role, he was the lead in-house counsel and led trial counsel for the Montana versus Wyoming water case before a special master of the United States Supreme Court. He was the longest Montana DOJ trial, which was the longest DOJ trial in recent years. In November 2014, Swanson was elected the Broadwater County Attorney. His office prosecutes approximately 50 felonies and 300 misdemeanors per year, everything from speeding tickets to homicides. He was reelected without opposition in 2018 and 2022. Swanson is the Vice President of Missoula County Attorneys Association. Next is Dan Wilson. Judge Dan Wilson is running for a seat at the Montana Supreme Court after more than 12 years on the bench and handling many hundreds of cases and trials. He's decided to seek a position on the High Court following the announcement that one of his current members will not seek re-election in 2024. His experience in the law began in 1993 when he accepted his first job as prosecutor in Great Falls and continues as he worked as a prosecutor in Chinook and later in Kalispell. In 1999, Dan settled into private practice and rounded out his legal experience representing people and businesses on a wide variety of legal issues that affect the lives of everyday Montanans. Dan worked on contracted disputes, estate planning, property and easements, and lawsuits of all sorts. Now for our speakers. Katherine Bidegaray was born in Sidney, Montana. That's east of us, if for all of you questioning that. Raised on a farm ranch in rural Richland County, Montana, and educated in Montana. After practicing law for almost 18 years, she was elected as district court judge, a position she has held for more than 21 years. With their father, she raised 5 children on their northeastern farm and ranch. Jerry Lynch was appointed a United States Magistrate judge for the District of Montana on June 10th, 2006. Judge Lynch retired August 2nd, 2019. During this time on the federal bench, Judge Lynch served on the Ninth Circuit Magistrate Judges Executive Board, the Ninth Circuit Jury Instructions Committee, and as a chair of the District of Montana's Local Rules Committee. In 1981, a 1981 graduate of the University of Montana School of Law, Judge Lynch began his career in Great Falls, Montana, serving as law clerk to the United States District Judge Paul Hatfield from 1981 to 1986. From 1996 until his appointment as the U.S. Magistrate Judge, Judge Lynch practiced as a trial attorney in Great Falls. Judge Lynch was born and raised in Butte, Montana. He received a bachelor's degree in biology from Carroll College in 1973. He graduated from Montana State University in 1975 with a master's degree in zoology and genetics. Judge Lynch and his wife Teresa have 4 children and 10 grandchildren. Without further ado, Katherine.
Okay, can you guys all hear me? All right, now, can you hear me? All right. Thank you for that warm welcome, for this opportunity to speak to you about my campaign for the Montana Supreme Court Justice seat that's currently held by Dirk Sandifer. I welcome this opportunity to let you know a little about me because, of course, I hope to garner your support. The Montana Supreme Court races are critically important to each of us because the decisions the Montana Supreme Court makes affect everyday Montanans every day. Thanks to the incredible support and dedication throughout the primary election from many Montanans, we achieved an important milestone on our journey to ensure justice and fairness for all Montanans. I was born in Sidney, Montana, where I still live, as the oldest child of courageous Basque parents who journeyed to eastern Montana from the Pyrenees Mountains of southwestern France to escape post-World War II poverty. On the land, Basque people were whalers. Actually, they weren't whalers on the land, they were sheep herders on the land. On the water, they were whalers. And in Montana, my parents were farmers raising small grains and hay, and ranchers raising first sheep and then cattle, and mentors raising children, 6 of them, which proved to be beneficial because, as many of you may know, the profit margin in farming and ranching is very slim, and having free labor helps improve that problem. Our farm and ranch was too far from the Missouri and Yellowstone rivers that flow through Richland County where it was located for us to have irrigation. So we learned on our dry land that while you generally reap what you sow, sometimes despite your best efforts because of circumstances beyond your control like weather, you don't. But you try your best anyway. My agricultural upbringing cultivated in me a strong work ethic and taught me the value of education. Having grown up during World War II in occupied France, my parents developed a deep appreciation for democracy and an even deeper appreciation for the United States, whose soldiers saved France from the grip and terror of occupation. My parents passed on their commitment to democracy and their love of the United States to us kids. My dad's motto was, "Don't be a sheep." And from that motto, I learned to think for myself, not be beholden to anyone, and never to follow blindly. After graduating from Culbertson High School, I earned my undergraduate, and 1 law degree from the University of Montana, which I hold near and dear to my heart. During the 2nd year of law school, my dad died unexpectedly, and although our family had never missed a loan payment or never been late on a payment, the federal government took the position that my dad's death was a default on our loan. Only a law student and grief-ridden at that, I had to leave law school for a bit and help my mom fight the federal government. And once I pointed out to them that had it been my mom rather than my dad who had died, and they wouldn't have blinked an eyelash, they, being faced with the prospect of a discrimination action, dropped it and backed off and let us continue making our payments, and we were able successfully to make all of the payments and own the land still today. Yes, it was. I went back to law school and completed my law degree and made a vow and committed myself to fight injustice and protect people's rights. I began my law career at the Montana State Auditor's Office in Helena, protecting Montana consumers against insurance and investment fraud. After almost 4 years at that office, when my being the oldest and all the rest of the 6 of us were either already finished with college and working or in college, and the free labor had dried up, our family faced another dilemma, and that was that we either needed to sell the farm and ranch or have my then husband and me move back to run it. We moved back. For the next 14 years, I engaged in the general practice of law in eastern Montana and western North Dakota, representing mostly hardworking Montanans, farmers, ranchers, small business owners, workers, teachers, people of all sorts. I engaged in the general practice of civil law, where I represented plaintiffs and defendants. I also practiced in criminal law, filling in at times at the county attorney's office when somebody would leave and they needed a stopgap person to prosecute, during times when I wasn't the public defender, and the rest of the time being a public defender on the side of handling my civil cases. For the last 21 years, I have served as a district court judge for the Montana 7th Judicial District, which is a 5-county district bordering North Dakota in northeastern Montana. Although I've presided over many, many diverse cases, and although they were primarily in eastern Montana, because I have accepted the invitation of judges who have been disqualified or find themselves to have a conflict to take on their cases, I have had the opportunity and the privilege of having handled cases in at least 40 of the 56 counties in Montana. In 2006, I started the first treatment court east of Billings for my judicial district, and I've continued to operate it for the last 18 years, the results of which are reduced crime, taxpayer savings, and transformed lives. As a judge, I've tried always to act with impartiality, independence, integrity, rationality, fairness, and reasonableness while developing and relying upon a good knowledge of the law. I have consistently set aside my personal opinions and preferences in deciding cases. We're living in times of unprecedented attacks on the judiciary, individual rights, particularly women's rights, and the rule of law, each of which is key to a healthy democracy. In this current environment, when the judiciary is facing a concerted effort to politicize our courts, Montana needs an experienced, nonpartisan judiciary, one that is willing to do the difficult work of upholding the unique rights that our Montana Constitution affords to every one of us. The right to privacy, equality of education, use and access to public lands and water, and a clean and healthful environment. In these challenging times, we need justices who leave the policy advocacy issues to the political branches and who remain free from political pressure to interpret the law and evaluate statutes relative to constitutional claims. We need Montana Supreme Court justices who are committed to the separation of powers that our Montana Constitution requires, who understand the critical importance of a fair and impartial judiciary, and who are faithful to the equal treatment of all Montanans, and who honor the preservation of the rule of law. My roots are in Montana. I was not only born, raised, and educated in Montana, but with their father, raised 5 children on our northeastern Montana farm and ranch. These 5 children, each of whom is a professional in his or her own community, are integral parts of their respective communities. And they have provided, most importantly for me, the joy of 6 grandchildren with 2 more on the way. So for the sake of these children, grandchildren, all of you here, all Montanans, the future of our democracy matters. I'm running for the Montana Supreme Court because I believe in our democracy, and I desire to do my part to maintain it for us and our future generations. I'm deeply motivated to continue to give back to the state of Montana and the people of Montana, to uphold our constitutional rights and to serve as a justice for all Montanans. My commitment to maintaining the integrity, impartiality, and fairness of Montana's highest court is unwavering. In keeping with my life so far, I will not be a sheep. Montana can remain the last best place only if each of us is willing to stand up to the assaults on our democracy. With your help, I'm prepared to do so. As we move forward towards the general election, our work is far from over. We must continue to build on the momentum we've gained and rally even more supporters to join our cause. As my candidacy has continued to gain momentum, my opponent is becoming more desperate. He has started to send out letters to begging, I guess, for money, and essentially proclaiming that he's going to be a partisan lackey. He is signaling that he will not be deciding difficult cases based upon our Montana Constitution and law, but on a dictated partisan agenda or ideology. Let's be clear. I am not and never have been a politician. In fact, as a district court judge, I am exactly the opposite, rejecting politics and partisanship in my courtroom and professionally. My opponent's letter demonstrates just how much he is in bed with the partisan politicians seeking to alter the function of the judiciary radically from an independent branch of government to a rubber stamp agency of the legislature. A judge who, like my opponent, embraces political extremism in a desperate effort to be elected to the Montana Supreme Court is simply revealing that he does not have the experience, demeanor, judgment, or qualifications to be trusted on Montana's highest court. I'm confident that Montana voters will see through my opponent's political smokescreen and see that he's actually a wolf in sheep's clothing, but really a sheep nonetheless, who will follow the agenda of the very extremist politicians whose favor he curries. In his latest letter, my opponent accuses me of having some sort of nefarious political agenda. I do have an agenda, but it is not political. My agenda remains clear: to protect the rights of all Montanans, to uphold the unique protections of our 1972 Montana Constitution, and to remain fair and maintain a fair and impartial judiciary. I appreciate this opportunity to speak to you as I work to broaden our appeal to unite all Montanans under our shared values of justice, equality, and integrity. Regardless of political affiliations or backgrounds, our campaign is about ensuring a just and fair Montana for everyone. Thank you for your attention. I hope you will join me to work together for Montana's future.
I guess it's my turn. As Dave indicated, I retired from being a federal judge, and excuse me, I caught a cold on the 4th of July from one of my grandchildren, if I have a raspy voice. But I woke up one day after having been in retirement for 3 to 4 years, and I was reading about the attack on the judiciary. Make no mistake, your judiciary, our judiciary, is under extreme attack, and I'll be talking about that. It's under extreme attack from politicians, lobbyists, and corporate interests that want to take over the court because, not just in Montana, but elsewhere, because it's the last bastion against complete power. Getting back to my story, I woke up one day and I'm reading all this, and I said to my wife of Terry of 49 years, Saint Terry they call her, but I said, I have a question for you. Is this fight, of course being from Butte, is this fight private or can anybody join? So I joined in the fight by running for the Chief Justice of the Montana Supreme Court. The next day, we get up, and as most of you may do, you say to your spouse, your significant other, how did you sleep? And she said, not worth a darn. She said, I had a nightmare you were running for the Supreme Court. But Terry has supported me in every step of my career. I mentioned the 4th of July. Both Judge Bidegaray and I were in the 4th of July parade in Butte, which is a marvelous day. And it gave us the opportunity, I believe, at least, well, I'm sure both of us, to see our grandchildren. She had many grandchildren there, I did too, and I thought, I have to do something for the future of these grandchildren. We've all had our day in the sun. Maybe not perfect, but we've had our opportunity. It's up to us to be stewards of those children's futures. When people ask me why are you running, I say I have 12 reasons. 1 through 10, my 10 grandchildren. 11, your children, your grandchildren, your families. And 12, future generations. Or as our native brothers and sisters say, the 7th generation. I know many of you are familiar with that principle. We have an obligation to ensure many things, but particularly all of the rights guaranteed to them at present, and I emphasize at present, by the 1972 Montana Constitution. Each of those children need to understand they have the opportunity, if they choose, to receive a free, quality, public education. They also need to rest assured that the right to individual dignity, the right to equal protection, and the right to privacy, which we all hold dear, will allow them to make the decisions as to how they wish to lead their life, inform their decisions, where appropriate, free from government interference, and I emphasize, women's reproductive freedom. But that freedom goes beyond. That goes to everybody's right to privacy. People who don't have ovaries, for instance, have to understand the right to privacy is much broader. We need to protect everyone's right to privacy. Both Judge Bidegaray and myself are running to protect those rights under the Constitution. That Constitution was developed by 100 citizens from all walks of life. Initially, it was a close call when it was enacted. But since then, Montana citizens have overwhelmingly acknowledged how wonderful that Constitution is. In the first mandatory assessment in 1990, it was 82%. I think I'm accurate on that. It was 80-something. The second 20 years, in 2010, it was almost 60%. That is coming up in 2030. So we all have to be very, very concerned with what happens in the next few years, but before 2030, in our government. Again, make no mistake, our judiciary is under attack, and it's a national playbook. 27 or 28 states have enacted laws to curtail the independence of the judiciary. I am running, as is Judge Bidegaray, to protect that independence, because without the independence of the judiciary, we have no democracy. Back in the day, Alexander Hamilton emphasized that. If we lose the independence of the judiciary, he said, democracy will follow. We have no liberty without an independent judiciary. And we have bills introduced in the Montana legislature to do away with Marbury versus Madison, who many of you may be familiar with. You may not know the name of the case, but it decided that the judiciary makes the final decision under the Constitution about disputes between citizens, between states, etc. Without that independence, we have no democracy, and that's what Hamilton emphasized. Now, the judiciary derives its power from the respect of the citizens. It doesn't have an army, which you've all heard. It doesn't have the power of the purse. It derives its power from respect of the citizens. If that power is ever degraded in any way, the judiciary loses, and you lose. Our democracy loses. That's what is afoot today, nationally and in our state. Those folks, and I call them the fringe elements on the far conservative side. It's not everybody. There's fine people in the middle. I'm sure many of you are. But they want to destruct that. For what? For more power. Pure and simply, more power. You have to protect against that. Now, I bring that up for this reason. Again, the judiciary derives its power from respect. Anything that undercuts the integrity, the ethics of the judiciary is detrimental, not just to the judiciary, it's detrimental to the government, to our democracy, to you. In the last few months, all of you I know have read week after week, if not day after day, editorials attacking the judiciary. A lot from primarily from legislators or past legislators, but it's an attack, an attack, an attack. They do not want an independent judiciary. We need that. Again, I bring this up because my opponent, Mr. Corey Swanson, his campaign is being run by the largest lobbying group in the state of Montana, the Montana Group. Now, he has a right to choose who he wishes to run his campaign. Looking at it from the outside, and I hopefully objectively, it's bothersome to me. It's more than bothersome. It's a grave concern because that firm represents some of the largest corporations that do business in Montana, big pharma, extraction industries, etc. What does that do to the perception if he is sitting as Chief Justice, the head of the entire judicial system in the state of Montana? I go back to perception. What does that do to the perception of the public if that entity has actually run his campaign and then have cases, their clients, before the Montana Supreme Court? Let me just put it frankly, it's not a good look. And it degrades, absolutely degrades the ethics and the integrity of the judicial system, and it degrades the power of the judicial system, the respect of the judicial system. So I go back to what Judge Bidegaray mentioned at the beginning of her talk. We are in a fight. We are in a fight to save our democracy. Make no mistake about it. These judicial races are, they call them second tier. I call them first tier, top tier. There are many other races going on, but in the day-to-day lives of Montana, these Supreme Court races are the most important races on our ballot, on your ballot. So please undertake to understand the candidates, undertake to understand what they stand for, undertake to look at their background. I was a judge for 14 years. I have a background. I'm proud of it. I have a judicial record. My opponent's never written a judicial opinion, instructed a jury, presided over a jury trial. None of those things. That matters. I will defend the independence of the judiciary as hard as I have for the last 40 years of my legal career. My mother had a great saying, and I was raised in Butte, and it's known for its raucous background, I guess. She had a saying that said, son, and there were 4 boys in my family, none of them, well, all of them pretty raucous, I guess. But she said, son, never fight. Never fight. But when you have to, fight like you're the third monkey on that ramp into Noah's Ark. And brother, it's raining.
All right. With that, I was challenged with coming up with one question just to show you all the somewhat of the format, because they are limited on how they respond to certain questions. So just be aware of that. So with that said, Based on the latest 6-3 ruling from the Supreme Court of the United States relating to the overturning of the Chevron doctrine, can each of you give us your understanding of the ruling and whether you agree or disagree with the ruling and why? Katherine.
Well, my understanding of the ruling is that the Supreme Court saw fit to strip away from agencies that were enacting rules to govern the industry and interpreting those rules and had authority to interpret some of the laws, the authority to do that. And the fear, I think, as a result of that decision is that the agency's power to protect consumers against the very entities that they're supposed to be governing and protecting the consumers against is going to be almost eliminated. It doesn't matter whether I agree with the decision or don't, because when I first became an attorney and every time I've been elected as district court judge, I take an oath. And the oath I take is to uphold the Montana Constitution and the United States Constitution and laws. And so when the Supreme Court, United States Supreme Court speaks, I have to honor the oath that I have taken, and I have to follow that decision. The law is, and I've said this many times before, it kind of reminds me of these chandeliers. It's like a prism. There are so many angles to the law, and that's what makes the job that I've been privileged to have as an attorney and then as a judge such a beautiful job, because it's never boring. The creative approaches of the attorneys who are representing litigants in cases really can focus on a different facet of the prison than anybody else ever did before. And so even though the Supreme Court has spoken in the Chevron case, it's very likely that when new litigation comes up and that case touches upon an issue that's being argued, that some creative person is going to be able to find a way maybe to distinguish it and say it's not applicable in this instance, or the reverse. But it's impossible for me to, I don't take a position on whether I agree with it or disagree with it. I will have to listen with an open mind, consider the unique facts to each case that comes before me and the applicable law, including that case, and make a decision. But I can't in advance say whether it's a good decision or bad.
Thank you. Judge Lynch?
As a citizen, and I speak as a citizen, not as your future Chief Justice, not as a past federal judge, that decision is going to impact all of us in more ways that we understand. Having been a federal judge and having reviewed many, many cases that come out of the administrative process where there are scientists, both social scientists in certain cases, biological scientists, chemistry scientists across the board. Those folks have the expertise to inform the courts in terms of what is the right way or the wrong way in a particular situation, a particular issue that comes before the court. As a judge, as Judge Bidegaray says, we're obligated. That is the law of the land. We're obligated to follow that law when it comes before us, and if the issue comes before us in a particular case. I don't think it's a good decision. Again, as a citizen, I make that demarcation. First of all, it puts a burden on the federal courts, which are number one, understaffed, underfunded, overworked. The state courts are even worse in terms of being underfunded, overworked, and understaffed. All of these, I'll use an example which you've probably heard, Social Security cases. Social Security cases, there was an administrative system in place where you had administrative law judges hearings officers that would hear the case in the first instance. An qualified administrative law judge would assess the hearings officer determination, make a determination, and the person had a right to bring that before the federal court, a United States district judge, to make a determination of whether that decision was correct. The system worked. Now, every one of those Social Security issues will come before the court for a jury trial. And I love, the jury system is the most remarkable invention, if you will, of the American democracy. It was the most hard-fought issue in the Constitutional Convention of the United States. But it's not necessarily the best in certain areas for people seeking a prompt decision so they can get on with their life. The Social Security Administration, by way of example, has been a marvelous example of administrative law. The same applies. I worked on the environmental cases out of Butte. I was fortunate enough to be the mediator in the multi-million-dollar, $257 million settlement of the state's natural resource damage claim against ARCO for the mining issues in Butte and Anaconda. The point I want to make on that is that those issues and all of the scientific information is synthesized by experts at the administrative level. Then that is funneled down to a hearings officer, ultimately to a judge. Without that, to just say to a judge, well, you're going to take this on day one, not that ultimately they wouldn't be capable of doing it with good assistance, but you can understand the delay. And we cannot afford delay in people's Social Security decisions. We cannot afford delay in environmental decisions, et cetera. So at the end of the day, as a citizen, bad decision would I follow it as a Chief Justice? Yes. I doubt that those decisions would impact us directly. But everyone needs to bear in mind the destruction of the administrative state in the federal government is of great concern because of the massive nature of it, but of also the detailed scientific nature of the issues that are distilled with good people in those administrative positions for a judge to make an informed decision.
Thank you. And with that, it brings us to our break. So for some of you that are new to this program, this is where we have time to sit at the table. Someone points a table ambassador. That's someone who gets the short straw that gets to ask the question. And so with that, we'll break for about 8 minutes, and I'll be back. And then we'll have 2 people walking around with microphones, and we'll need to have someone raise their hand. Okay? We'll be back. All right, so everyone has their table ambassador, right? Raise your hand if you're the table ambassador, please.
Sorry.
All right. So we've now reached the point where this is where we get to ask those questions. As I said at the beginning, we're committed to civil discourse, so we ask that you keep your question respectful and that you avoid making statements. Minimize them. We don't need your autobiography. As you can see from the audience, we have a large number of guests and would like to ask a question. So please get to the question as quickly as possible. We also ask that any member of the media save their questions until after the forum. Our panelists should be able to stick around at the end. Also, our people walking around with the mics, they will hold it in their hands. So please don't reach for it. It might take you down. Oh, just joking, they won't.
Won't wrestle you for it. What ethics Melody Cunningham, candidate for the new House District 97 without an incumbent. What ethics training and conflict of interest divulgement are mandated or required for Montana Supreme Court justices, and how are ethics violations or possible violations handled?
Ever since each of us became an attorney, we're required to take 3 ethics credits a year, and that requirement continues once you become a judge, and it applies to district court judges as well as Supreme Court justices. We have an association called the Montana Judges Association, which includes all of the district court judges and the Supreme Court justices. It holds 2 trainings per year, one in May, one in October. And every time during those trainings, we have at least 3 hours of ethics available to us so that we can meet our requirement. So you'd have an opportunity actually to earn 6 credits in a year. How complaints are handled is that the Supreme Court has there's a code of judicial conduct, and there is a commission to which the complaints are filed, and those complaints are kept confidential. The committee screens the complaints to see if there's any reason even for the judge to respond. Sometimes I think complaints get filed to them and they determine that there's not enough basis to it even to ask the judge to respond, and they dismiss them at hand without even passing it on to the judge. If there's enough of a question raised, they forward the complaint to the judge about whom the complaint is made and give that judge an opportunity and a deadline by which to reply. After considering the complaint made and the reply, then they make some determinations on whether it should go further up. If it passes all the different levels, then the Supreme Court the committee makes a recommendation to the Supreme Court as to the disciplinary action to be taken against the judge, and then the Supreme Court doles out the punishment.
I would say this, that anyone that's a judge, wants to be a judge, wants to be a Supreme Court justice, needs sound ethics and integrity. 2 different things. Ethics being the study, so to speak. Integrity being your moral character. We can't change moral character through training. You have it or you don't have it from the kitchen table, so to speak, or from your life experiences. However, the State Bar does, as Judge Bidegaray has indicated, undertakes to the extent it can to require that. I want to go directly to your last point. What happens with ethics violations? That goes to the Judicial Standards Committee, which the participants, the members of that Judicial Standards Committee, two attorneys appointed by the Supreme Court, 2 by the judges of the entire judiciary in the state, and 2 or 3 by the governor. Lay people. Yeah, lay people by the governor, non-attorneys. The last legislature changed that. When I mentioned earlier a national playbook, what do you think one of the number 1 things that the power, I will call them mongers, want? They want to take over the disciplinary action of the judiciary. They want to take that from the Supreme Court, all competent, qualified jurists and state court judges, and give it to who? The legislature and the Attorney General. You be the judge of that. That, I can't speak more about that because I believe it's a subject of a current lawsuit. The Supreme Court ruled on judicial nominating committee, same sort of thing. Undid what has been in place since the 1972 Constitution and worked marvelously in terms of who would decide or nominate who would be replaced on a retiring or disabled whatever judge. That has now went to and the Supreme Court was correct. I don't disagree with the ruling. Whether it's good public policy or prudent, I don't think so. Nonetheless, it's the law. And now that the governor, the legislature, has the say in terms of who will be the nominees. It's more important, however, with discipline, because there have been bills introduced in the legislature, and I can't comment directly. I just put them out there rhetorically for you to consider, that the legislature can decide in a particular case whether they should take that case from the court system and resolve it themselves, or they are the ones that will discipline the judicial branch. I go back to my initial comments. If we don't have equal branches of government wherein the judiciary, both in our United States Constitution and more importantly in our state constitution, says the judiciary decides constitutional issues, then we don't have a constitutional democracy. We have a democracy, okay, but it's entirely different. The constitutional democracy provides all of us protections. A simple democracy leads to autocracy. I am concerned about the legislature and or the executive branch taking over the discipline of the judiciary, as well as the discipline of practicing attorneys. It's worked marvelously. Nobody can point to an example where it's went awry, but nonetheless, it's part of a game plan.
Hey everybody, my name is Andy Nelson. I'm the Executive Director of the Western Montana LGBTQ Community Center. First of all, thank you both for being here today. Specifically, Judge Bidegaray, I'm also a proud Culbertson High School graduate, so it's
I know your dad. We
Yes.
went to high school together. He was one of my buddies.
Thanks for being here. Our question here at the table is, how would you influence, if elected to the state Supreme Court, how would you influence and nurture collaboration amongst your fellow justices, as well as improve relationships with the legislature?
Well, as far as collaboration among judges, I think that we do have good collaboration because generally people who end up in that role have developed good listening skills and good analytical skills that they are able to understand that heated discussions rarely result in good decisions. So as I don't know that much needs to be done as far as collaboration among the judges. As far as the tension that there is right now among the three co-equal branches of the government, with two of them basically aligned against the judiciary, I think each of us just has to be sure in the judiciary that we don't resort to the same kind of tactics and that we do keep a cool mind, that we do listen to what they have to say, and that we do nothing to impede the possibility of dialogue with them. Democracy relies on dialogue. I mean, that's why we have the First Amendment, so that people can say whatever, so that we have free discourse of ideas, so that the best ideas come forward. But I do think that when you have extremists that are in power, eventually they eat their own, you know? You have the situation where like they're trying to take control of the legislature would like to be in charge of disciplining the judiciary, and that's really essentially like putting the fox in charge of the chicken coop, you know, have them decide that what's constitutional definitely is the fox in charge of the chicken coop. But thinking like that isn't going to achieve like what you're suggesting, that we do need to develop. So I think each of us, we can only control ourselves, but the best way to remediate the damage that's attempted to be done to the judiciary is for those who are within the judiciary to behave with integrity, with professionalism, to listen, and not engage with like tactics. And just so everybody in this room knows, that person can play the piano like none other. I got to watch him play from the time he was a little tiny kid. So
Awesome. I would agree with Judge Bidegaray completely in terms of that portion of your question that went to the collaboration among the justices. Now, there are going to be hard-fought battles. There's no doubt about it. But I do think people that are there have trained themselves, and both Judge Bidegaray and I have, I believe it's fair to say, trained ourselves to be willing to work together with people and have a vibrant, critical discussion of issues. One of the things I did over the course of my career was mediate hundreds, if not thousands, of cases, and I mean, people are coming in. And I was very successful at it. I'm not blowing my own horn, but I was. That's going to prove valuable for me and Judge Bidegaray on the Supreme Court. But I'm not concerned about that. I am concerned about your question as it pertains to the legislature. I am willing, as is Judge Bidegaray, to work with anybody to better our state government. Most importantly, to better the access to justice for everyone. I'm concerned with what I see. I'm concerned where the legislature most recently is going to have a judicial oversight committee. This is the second one, I believe. My concern is that there are, not all, but the extremists. They don't want a co-equal branch called the judiciary. As a matter of fact, one of the principal parties in the state in their platform recently, last week, did away with that terminology in their platform. We have 3 branches of government, but according to them, they're not equal. That will destroy our system as we know it. So, I am more than happy to work with anybody, collaborate with anybody. I've done that my entire career. I will continue to do that. But I will not. I tell this to all of you. I tell it to the citizens of Montana. I will not allow the independence of the judiciary to be sacrificed, period.
Yes, my name is David Gregg. Our question is, what are the top 3 issues heard throughout the state? During your campaign.
Okay.
Well, I will go first this
Yeah, you
time.
go. Yes.
We've kind of hit on the issues that I think both of us have heard. We've been in a lot of different functions together. Number 1 is the independence of the judiciary. Number 2, and they're so interrelated, one exists for the other, and that's the protection of the 1972 Constitution and the individual rights contained in that Constitution. It is the most marvelous document in terms of a state constitution that has ever been developed. I think if you read about it, most scholars say that's one hell of a document. We have to protect that document. People want to protect that document. What's interesting, going to your question in terms of what the issues are, people sometimes forget that what I may believe is important for me one day, and I want that, may not be the best for our community. And so people as citizens have to understand we have obligations as citizens, not just to push forward what we want as individuals or as entities, but we have to think about the common good. And I think people understand that. They're concerned about that. I will say this, that people are concerned, number 1, with our right to privacy. That pertains particularly to women's reproductive health care, or health care in general. I should say health care in general. That is the number 1 issue. What both of us, I'm sure, emphasize is that the right to privacy is much, much broader than a woman's right to reproductive autonomy. It affects every one of us in different ways, especially, I mentioned earlier, those without ovaries, so to speak. Your right to privacy is at issue when someone else's right to privacy is impeded. When I used to do naturalization ceremonies as a federal judge, one of the finest days that I had as a judge, I would say to those folks, guard your civil rights jealously, because they are only as secure as those of your neighbors, even those with whom you disagree. The point I make is that, and we hear this on the campaign trail, we have to protect everyone's right to privacy, everyone's right to individual dignity, and not let it be parsed out by a focus on women's reproductive rights, by a focus upon gay rights, by a focus on this or that. It's everybody's right to privacy. But remember, yours is only secure as your neighbor's.
I don't have anything to add to that because that matches what I've heard.
I'm Alexandra Volkerts. I'm a retired attorney. I've done both business banking and real estate and civil rights law. So I kind of come at this from a broad perspective. One of the issues that we talked about is this right to privacy and how it affects us beyond just right to healthcare decisions. I'd like you to talk about what you see the right to privacy impacting our digital privacy.
Well, as a district court judge, I am doing search warrants every day, many of them. And I have to tell you, the number one thing that peace officers seek a search warrant for is cell phones and computers. So, but there has to be the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution and the corresponding one for Montana really required them to meet some sort of a threshold before the access to those kinds of documents can be obtained. Outside of the criminal arena, where people are seeking search warrants, I do think that in this day and age where we have all kinds of entities tracking everything we do or say, or we're carrying these little computers with us everywhere we go and they know what we do. Or I'm talking to somebody and we're talking about a topic and all of a sudden my phone has been listening to me the whole time and I'm getting ads for that very thing. That it's one of those areas where expertise is required. I mean, it will be one of those things, as Judge Lynch said before, where we would really need to rely on computer scientists who can explain how it was that maybe somebody breached someone's privacy by tapping into things that they shouldn't have been listening to. So I think it's a scary thing. Our next training sessions are going to cover artificial intelligence and all of that too. So we've got so much going on in our world right now where privacy matters, because you can incorporate that kind of technology into this, and I don't know like where all it could spiral into. But definitely our digital information is subject to the right of privacy. How you practically protect it is an entirely, I don't, it's daunting to me. I don't even know, because I don't understand it myself. I would really need to rely on some expert witness to be testifying to me about how the breach occurred and whatever, to understand the implication against the right of privacy. I know I didn't answer. That was like in circles and circles and spirals.
It's a legitimate answer, because I was going to say rhetorically, what right to privacy? What right to digital privacy? When I look at my cell phone every day.
The concern is that
Yeah.
do we have a reasonable expectation of privacy anymore? Are we eroding it by the fact that we do these things, by the fact that we say, okay, I'll accept your cookies, I mean, I don't know. Those are the
I would
issues.
say this, that on a very practical level, you need to elect judges that will uphold the Fourth Amendment. You need to elect justices, Supreme Court, that will uphold the Fourth Amendment. When we talk about all of this digital heaven out there, that's sort of beyond the capabilities of the state of Montana, so to speak. Where it does come into play is on the individual person charged with a criminal offense or even a inquiry into a civil matter, that there are judges that will uphold the Fourth Amendment and uphold the protections afforded to each of us. That's where the rubber meets the road at the end of the day, is in the judge's chambers, who's looking at a search warrant, as Judge Bidegaray does over and over. I did over and over. You need strong people, to be quite honest, to say, no, even though it may be a crime that is heinous, terrible, you can't infringe upon the person's right under the Fourth Amendment. And sometimes that's hard. Judges take some hits on that. But you need that to protect your rights versus that particular suspect. The one thing I want to emphasize in that regard, your question brings into play this. Those detractors, as I will call them, of the broad reading of the right to privacy in the Montana Constitution wanted to limit that right to privacy to digital information or personal information, etc. The Supreme Court in Armstrong rejected that, and it's going to be faced again in different contexts or the same context, whatever. The right to privacy is much broader than simply information, but that was the tactic taken, well, I wouldn't say tactic, but the position taken by those people who wanted the right to privacy in our Constitution very limited. So beware of that. Our right to privacy has to be, I think it is broad, and it has to be broad. We can't talk about any specific issue that comes before the court, but I will tell you this. I will follow the precedent of the Montana Supreme Court as established in regard to women's reproductive autonomy, period.
All right, with that said, we are on the hour, so thank you all for the great questions. Thank you to the candidates. Appreciate your input. So again, thank you to our sponsors, First Security Bank and Blackfoot Communications, and of course you, our audience. Thank you for your attendance.
Thank you all for giving us this opportunity.
So we are still working on the August forum. It has not penciled out quite like we wanted, but we're still working on it. So please check back on our website. Also be aware, the hotel's kind of struggling to order food at certain times. So if you are planning on attending the forums the Wednesday before, please get your registrations in so we can get you lunch. Otherwise, it's going to have to be coffee and cookies. So, all right, with that, enjoy the rest of your day.